Hey YouTubers, welcome back to Desert Have a Garden. I have had many requests for a cinnamon roll recipe, and so today I finally want to give you that, and I want to give you a whole bunch of options to go with it. So one of the first options will be how and when you want to bake it. So I like to bake my cinnamon rolls in the morning because that's when you eat cinnamon rolls, right? So this gives us the option to do all of the work today and simply get up and bake them in the morning. And another way you could do that is after doing the work, you could allow them to rise and put them directly into the oven, skipping the overnight thing and having the cinnamon rolls at whatever time of day that you prefer. Another option is, what do you put inside them? Of course, cinnamon rolls are tradition, and they are super yummy with their sugary cinnamony filling, but there's also more that we can do with that. You could spread jam inside for more of a fruity roll. You could spread peanut butter. Everybody loves peanut butter, right? And you could also spread things like Nutella, which is that delicious hazelnut chocolatey spread. And so you can choose what you want your filling to be. These are versatile rolls. You could make them vegan by simply omitting the egg and using coconut oil instead of butter. I do have some customers who are vegan and they still make a really delicious roll. The purpose of the eggs in the recipe is that it adds some extra moisture and richness. And so without those, you're still going to have a delicious roll. Another option is how you go about kneading them. I will be using a KitchenAid mixer today because based on feedback, I saw that many people have a KitchenAid mixer, and I want you to be able to use the equipment that you have. You could also use a bread machine on the dough setting, which is my preference actually. I feel like it does a more simple and better job than the KitchenAid mixer even does. You can also use your muscles and do it with sheer man or woman power and knead it all by hand. That's definitely not my preference. I don't particularly enjoy kneading bread for long periods of time. So with all of that said, let's talk about how long it takes to make these cinnamon rolls. They are a long process, so you're going to need to think about when you want to start making them and when you want to actually eat them. It takes about 25 minutes for the mixing and kneading process. It takes another 2 hours approximately for the first rising. I would say it takes about another 10 minutes to roll them out, flatten them, and get them filled back up. There is about another 10 minutes of resting time in there as well, and then you can either allow them to rest overnight and then baking them for approximately 30 minutes in the morning, or you can allow them to rise for about an hour and baking them immediately without putting them in the refrigerator. So this whole process is a long process, and you can just manage your time that way. I like to start them in the afternoon, put them in the refrigerator in the evening, and then bake in the morning. And you can leave them in the refrigerator up to 16 hours. So that gives you a little better judge as to how you're going to manage your time. Let's go ahead and get started. I have all of my ingredients laid out here, and we're going to go ahead and get started putting them all directly into the bowl of the KitchenAid mixer. So first we need 6 cups of flour, and all-purpose flour works well for this recipe. It doesn't require a strong bread flour or anything like that. Next, we'll put in our sugar, and that takes a ½ cup. And continuing with the dry ingredients, we have 1 teaspoon of salt, and also 1 packet of yeast if you have them in packets. If you buy it in bulk sizes like this, it's 2 1/4 teaspoons of yeast. Moving on to the wet ingredients, 2 tablespoons of coconut oil or butter works. I just happen to have more coconut oil on hand right now, so that's what we're going with. We also need 2 eggs, and I like to have them at room temperature when I put them in so they don't cool down the dough. These are actually duck eggs that a girlfriend gave to me in trade for some some sourdough starter. So they're a little bit bigger than the typical egg, and that's okay too. Then next comes water. So we need 1.5 cups of warm water. And then we are ready to get mixing. Hook the bowl into your KitchenAid mixer. And you'll need your dough hook. Affix that onto the machine. Let me move this a little closer to you. And start it on a slow speed so it doesn't go splashing out everywhere. When the machine starts to sound like it's getting bogged down, increase the speed to a medium speed. After about 5 minutes of kneading with the machine, you'll have a dough that has all come together. We're going to allow it to rest for about 5 to 10 minutes before we knead it again using the mixer. I have allowed the dough to rest for 10 minutes, and I like to give it a little squirt with just some pure water in a squirt bottle because it does dry out a little bit while it's setting here. And then we'll go ahead and turn the mixer back on to medium speed and allow it to mix for another about 7 minutes. If you are using a bread machine on the dough setting, you just allow it to do its thing until it's gone through the entire dough cycle. Now that it has completed its kneading, I will lift it out of the pan. So first get it off the dough hook there. I'll get this guy out of the way. I like to use a little paddle to help it come out nicely here. Onto your clean counter surface. Getting all the bits there. And then I like to just give it a couple kneads to form it into a nice ball. I actually am putting the cart before the horse here. Forgot to mention that we need to have a bowl ready, and to prepare the bowl you need to put a little bit of oil in it. The coconut oil works fine, butter works fine, any sort of spray Pam or anything like that also works well. You just don't want the dough to stick to the edges of the bowl after it has risen because it tears the gluten structure. Okay, so we're greased up nicely here. And this guy, just get it into a round ball. And then we'll put it in the bowl to allow it to rise. I like to do another little spray of water over the top of that so it doesn't develop a hard crust on the surface. And then using plastic wrap, seal it up nicely. Make sure your wrap completely covers the whole bowl so that your dough doesn't dry out. You'll see it steaming up in there and watching it rise. There we go. So this will actually take a substantial amount of time to double in size because we didn't use a very large amount of yeast for the amount of flour that we used. So it can take usually about 2 hours to double in size, and make sure you allow it to double in size so that it really develops that structure we're looking for. While your dough is rising, you will want to prepare your cinnamon sugar mixture or whatever your toppings are going to be. If you're going to use cinnamon sugar for the entire roll, because this does make 2 portions, so you can have 2 different rolls, 2 of the same, whatever you like, you're going to need 1 cup of sugar, and you can do a combination of half brown sugar and half white sugar, or if you only have one or the other on hand, you can do that as well. I like the flavor best when I mix the 2 sugars together, so there's a half cup of brown and a half cup of white sugar. And many recipes only call for 1 tablespoon of cinnamon. However, I really like that cinnamon flavor, so I use 2 tablespoons. If that's too much for you, you can certainly cut back. And here's where more options come in. You could certainly add in some ginger, if you like some powdered ginger in there to give a little extra spice. It's all up to you, whatever your preference is for your flavors. So using a fork, you just mix this together until it is well incorporated, and then we will move on to filling and rolling our dough next. The dough has risen for 2 hours, and you can see here that it's pressing up against the top of the plastic. It has really fluffed up and it's nice and steamy in there. So we are going to turn it out onto the counter. And if you don't oil your plastic and it makes it all the way to the top, it will stick a little bit. So I gently peel it off of here. And then, because it is oiled, that should come out quite easily onto the counter. And from here, we'll want to divide it into 2 equal-ish portions. If you really want to be precise, you can use a scale. It really doesn't matter for this purpose. Okay, and then I kind of gather it up, and we're going to allow this dough to rest for about 10 minutes so it's easier to roll it out after it's had a chance to deflate and rest. While that's happening, you get your pans ready, and I have, maybe I'll work over here. I have 2 Pyrex pans. I believe they're the 9x13 size, and you'll want to oil those so that the rolls don't stick to them. You can use a napkin or a paper towel or just your hands. It really doesn't matter. I wash my hands so frequently that what's one more wash? Okay, that one's all greased up. And let's switch it out for the second pan. A little more oil for that one. And again, you can use butter for this. It just doesn't matter which one you use. Also Pam spray. Now our pans are prepared. We'll have plastic wrap ready. In addition to the cinnamon sugar, you'll want to have either melted butter or more coconut oil ready to spread out and to make that cinnamon sugar stick to the dough. I have allowed some time for the dough to rest, and I actually covered one over here with plastic wrap so it won't dry out. And I have my little pot of flour there. So if your dough is sticky, you can use that. Mine's a little bit sticky today. It's actually kind of rainy out, so the humidity is a little higher today. And you shape this into a long rectangle. And so the width of it will be rolling, and the length is cutting how many rolls you'll get out of it. So making it quite thin is a good idea. That way you get more swirly stripes of cinnamon in it. And when the dough had a chance to rest, it's more inclined to spread out rather than to spring back with elasticity. If you try and do it right after you deflate it, it often will fight you a little bit more. Same thing kind of happens with pizza dough. Okay, so we've got a nice big rectangle here, and I like to make sure it's not stuck because when you go to roll it, it becomes quite the pain if it's stuck to your surface. Okay, next you'll add your fat. So whether you have melted butter or coconut oil, just a thin layer to get the cinnamon sugar to stick to. This is really similar, quite nearly identical to the cinnamon swirl bread recipe that I also have a video for. Okay, next comes the cinnamon sugar. And remember, we made enough cinnamon sugar for both pieces of the dough, so you can be quite generous. If you're only going to do cinnamon on one and a different topping on the other, keep that in mind. When you're making it, you can half the amount. Also, if you only want to have a few cinnamon rolls, you can half this recipe. I don't know why you would do that, because even if you didn't want them, you certainly could make a bunch and then have lots of friends by sharing them. I always make a lot. And here I'm being very generous with our cinnamon sugar swirl. You get it out close to the edges there. Next, we start rolling it. You can roll it whichever way you prefer. And this is a little tricky. You just kind of have to work it with your fingers, tucking it under. So it's almost like you're stretching it and pulling it back while you're tucking it forward. Once you get all the way to the end, you kind of press the seam down and you squeeze your roll to make it somewhat equal. And we will slice these using a serrated knife and get them into the pan. So about 1.5 inches thickness, and you use the sawing motion. And you can see I didn't make exactly 12 there, but that's okay too. So we've got our cinnamon rolls, and at this point, we probably want to brush on a little bit more coconut oil so as to avoid the plastic wrap sticking to them. So using a pastry brush, you can just dab on a little bit of oil or melted butter. And cover it tightly with plastic wrap. Now, if you're doing the overnight option, you'll put this right into the fridge. Don't allow it to rise at all, just directly into the refrigerator. And if you are going to be baking them today, go ahead and allow them to rise at room temperature until they're nice and puffy and ready for the oven. Now the other portion of dough we're going to make into the next roll. So let's get a little bit of flour out onto our surface and start making our rectangle. Now is where we're going to get interesting. I'm going to take some peanut butter and spread peanut butter all over this one. So this is for you peanut butter lovers out there. Okay, you could leave it like that, or you could sprinkle on a wee bit of sugar to make it more sweet. And here is where it gets interesting. I'm going to add some chocolate chips, because why not? Right now things are a little crazy in our world and all diets are out the window, right? So let's just have fun with this and make it super tasty. Put the things that you like on it. I hope you comment down below in the comments and tell me what you think would be a fun combination. I mean, geez, you could put like rainbow sprinkles in here. You could put whatever. Just make it fun. Get your kids involved. Good times in the kitchen. Okay. So this is going to be a fun one here. Chocolate peanut butter. Sounds good to me. And we'll just start rolling it up. I know they're off camera so you can't see them, but all three of my kids are standing over there like, what is she putting in these rolls? I have a feeling I'm going to have some taste testers as soon as these come out of the oven. All right, same thing, we'll brush them with coconut oil, cover it up tightly with plastic wrap, and either allow it to rise for an hour with the oven preheating to 350 degrees to bake it right now, or directly into the refrigerator for overnight rising for baking in the morning. Good morning, everyone. Hope you all had a good night's rest. I just pulled the cinnamon rolls out of the refrigerator, and now I've got to preheat the oven to 350 degrees, get the coffee started, get the tea going, get the oven going, and we'll bake some cinnamon rolls. Okay, the oven is all preheated and these are going to go into the oven, so take off your plastic wrap. And you can see these are the peanut butter chocolate chip, nice and puffy and rising. And then the cinnamon swirl. Now, if you had leftover cinnamon sugar mixture, you can put that on the top of these, which I'm going to do right now. So I just sprinkle it on there because I actually don't put icing on my cinnamon rolls because I just don't like the icing. Much to my kids' chagrin, they would really like icing, but I have lots of leftover cinnamon swirl here, and I think it just brings out all of that good cinnamony flavor. These go into the oven for 30 minutes, and I use a thermometer, an internal temperature thermometer, to check and pull them out at 188 degrees, but that's usually 30 minutes, so let's keep it simple there. Into the oven they go. These buttes just came out of the oven, and they're looking mighty tasty. Super huge too. So if you wanted to add icing, now would be a good time to add it. There's millions of recipes online that you can use for icing recipes, but like I said, I don't particularly care for it. So let's scoop this guy out of here. The first one's always the toughest, right? There we go, look at that. Plate it up. See, it's still steaming. That's the way that you definitely want to eat these guys. Let's try a peanut butter one. Peanut butter chocolate chip. All right. There we go, kind of fell apart. Going to put that on a plate. And all that's left is finding some volunteers here. Yummy, yummy. It looks like I have someone here who wants to try it. You want to rip off a piece? Let's see what it's like. Oh wow, you rip off a big piece, don't you? Do I have any volunteers who may want to try the peanut butter chocolate? Oh, I think I found a volunteer over here. I'll hold it if you want to rip off a piece. Can you squeeze into the picture frame there? There we are. First off, how's the cinnamon?
Good.
Good. Is it all you had hoped it'd been? This guy has been asking for cinnamon rolls for quite some time now, so he is happy that I finally made them. Now, what do you think of the peanut butter chocolate?
Tasty.
Tasty. The mouth is full. All right, guys. Well, I hope this recipe proves to be easy for you, and in these trying times, I want you to know that I am thinking about you. I'm keeping you in mind, and I hope everybody is doing well, and I hope that you have a beautiful Easter and enjoy your family. So if you enjoyed this video, give me a thumbs up and subscribe for more updates in the future.